While this near 30-year-old franchise has introduced countless new mechanics throughout its lifespan that are loved and enjoyed by at least some portion of the fanbase, there exists one that is met with almost exclusively negative reception. Shiny Pokémon, a mechanic introduced in Generation 2, is a feature where Pokémon have a rare chance of being a different color. It has no effect on anything else, it is purely visual. When it was first introduced, every single Pokémon you encountered could be shiny. Just a pure luck of the draw every single time you encountered a Pokémon, no matter the species. This, however, was changed come the 5th generation. When Generation 5 rolled around, the Pokémon world was introduced to not only one of the greatest games in the entire franchise, but also the worst mechanic to ever grace the series, the Shiny Lock. The Shiny Lock is exactly as it sounds. It locks certain Pokémon from being shiny. In Gen 5, they are used very sparingly. It was used on Reshiram and Zekrom in both the originals and the sequels. This could make sense in the point of view that since the legendaries are so integral to the stories of the games and feature in a decent amount of cutscenes at this point in the series, that they want to keep some kind of visual continuity between the ones seen in the cutscenes and the ones you actually encounter. This is still a controversial decision, as even with the mindset of the visual continuity, we already had 3 generations beforehand where it wasn't an issue, and Reshiram and Zekrom shinies aren't all too different anyway. This also leads to a new culture of, if you want the shiny of a box legend, you have to wait for it to become available in a later generation. While not ideal, they thankfully aren't locked forever. The bigger contention in Generation 5, however, is Victini. In the original Black and White, there was a mystery gift that allowed you to go and catch a wild Victini, much like the mythical events in the games beforehand. However, unlike those, Victini is shiny locked. This shiny lock is the proper writing on the wall for things to come, for not only was it the last mythical event for a long time where you could actually catch it, but it started the trend of shiny mythicals becoming far less obtainable. To this day, Victini still has never been legally obtainable as shiny, and the same goes for a majority of the mythicals released post-Victini. Shiny mythicals are no longer a rare bonus for participating in a mystery gift, they are now a handout that the Pokemon Company decided to seldomly hand out. Across the mainline games, Victini, Meloetta, and Keldeo are all catchable by the player at one point or another, and they are all shiny locked, while the final Gen 5 mythical, Genesect, can be shiny hunted exclusively in raids in Pokemon Go. So even worse than being a rare handout, shiny mythicals are being used to drive up sales of raid passes in a spin-off mobile game. I'm guilty of falling into it myself, doing raids to get both shiny Deoxys and Genesect. I spent the money, but really not necessarily proud of having to do so. Alright, if the issues with shiny locking was just that it was the box legends having to wait a generation to be huntable, and shiny mythicals became near non-existent, this video would be over. However, that's just not the case. As the games move forward, more and more shiny locks get put into place. In X and Y, every single legendary is shiny locked. All 3 new legendaries, as well as the returning legendary birds and Mewtwo. We now have an instance of Pokemon that weren't previously shiny locked now being so. This didn't raise too many alarms in the long run, as the next set of games, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, reduced the shiny locks to the box legends, Rayquaza, the newly permanently obtainable Deoxys, and Cosplay Pikachu. Now, there are 4 Pokemon here who weren't locked in the past but now have locks, but the Weather Trio being story relevant and Deoxys falling under the shiny mythical lockout, everything seemed normalish, just what Pokemon wants to be the new status quo. Cosplay Pikachu is also a special case, where it's a very unique form of Pikachu, and it's locked to Oras, so it being locked isn't the worst thing. Also, these games had almost every legendary in the series at this point that weren't featured in X and Y, so while there were locks on Pokemon previously huntable, there are still a whole bunch you could hunt, including Reshiram and Zekrom for the very first time. In Sun and Moon, they introduced a whopping 9 legendaries and 7 Ultra Beasts that were all shiny locked. The Type Null line was thankfully spared, but everything else was doomed to be unobtainable for whoever knows how long. Thankfully, a year later when Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon released, they became a bit more lenient, as all of the Ultra Beasts were now unlocked, even the new ones they added in these games. Them being locked originally was an odd decision, given that most of them were able to be obtained multiple times in a single playthrough. That's not all, as the Ultra games continued what Oras has started and let you catch almost all of the past legendaries in the postgame, even unlocking Xerneas and Yveltal. A noticeable exclusion here is Zygarde. In these games, Zygarde got new forms, and part of the gimmick was finding Zygarde cells to power it up until you get 100%. Due to this new mechanic, Zygarde remained shiny locked. As the handheld era of Pokemon came to a close, we are left in an interesting state of the shiny lock, where more and more are added each gen, and a Pokemon now being obtainable in a later generation doesn't even confirm that a lock will be removed. Shiny legendaries are being shifted from a hunt to conquer to a measly handout, in the same vein of the mythicals. They are taking away the opportunities for you to get stories of how long you hunted or how you nearly lost it, and they're just being replaced with, yeah, I went to EB Games and got a code card or two. The Switch era Pokemon started out strong in terms of shiny locking, as Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee only shiny lock your partner Pokemon. Everything else is able to be hunted. Granted, the game only has the first 150, 153 if you get Mew from the Pokeball Plus and Meltan and Melmetal from Go, but those first 150 are all able to be hunted, as well as all of the Alolan forms. The starters being locked, very similar to Cosplay Pikachu, aren't the absolute worst. It's nice not to worry about a shiny being possibly locked to a single game. The very next release, however, was not as nice. While your starters were unable to leave Let's Go, Sword and Shield did not have this restriction on the starters, and yet they still shiny locked them. Generation 8 marked the death of new starter shiny hunts. This might be due to the fact that they have started having grand introductions to starters and decided to implement the visual continuity idea they had with the box legendaries. Speaking of, as you could expect, the new legendaries introduced are also locked, both base game and DLC, with the exception of the 2 new Regis. However, they are not affected by the shiny charm, so you're forced to full odd hunt them no matter what. While annoying, I definitely prefer it over the locks, that's for sure. So now that should be all, but this is when they really start ramping it all up. The Gift Charmander, G-Max Pikachu, G-Max Eevee, Toxel, and even Type Null are all shiny locked. The first 3 could be a way to avoid giving out shiny G-Max Pokemon, but the first DLC gave the ability to give the G-Max factor to all Pokemon besides Melmetal. Toxel, sure, as its gist is it was a pre-hatched Pokemon by a breeder, but Type Null being huntable in its original game but not now is very irritating. So if you want one, you need to play Gen 7. It feels even weirder when the Crown Tundra DLC gives you a way to shiny hunt almost every legendary from the first 7 generations, either between the Dynamax adventures or from the standard encounters throughout the DLC. Despite this though, Type Null isn't alone, for the Poipole they gave you in the DLC is also locked. So not only is it the same situation as Type Null, it's even worse as Poipole is only huntable in specifically the Ultra games. Cosmog also returns and is still shiny locked, despite the Dynamax adventures now allowing for you to get Solgaleo and Lunala as shiny. We're still not done with these games, for in the Isle of Armor, you are tasked with finding 150 Alolan Diglett, and after every so many you are given a regional form Pokemon not normally found in the Galar region, as well as a Gen 7 starter that is the same type as the Galar starter you chose, and all of those are shiny locked. For the first stage Pokemon, it's not a super big deal as you can breed for them, but this is the only way to get Alolan Raichu, Alolan Marowak, and Alolan Exeggutor in these games without transferring. They're thankfully huntable in the Let's Go games. However, that's through trades, so they can't have your OT, which is undoubtedly a turnoff for some people. To finish us off, there's a gift Porygon, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle in this DLC that are all locked. The game has 3 full starter sets that are completely shiny locked. Oh, I guess I can also mention Keldeo. This is the time that Keldeo is actually catchable in a mainline game, and would have been a great time to finally release its shiny, but no, still locked. On a much lighter note, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl being faithful remakes have a rare upside, being that they didn't shiny lock anything except for the special gift Mew and Jirachi. Oh, and they did the shiny lock for the Manaphy egg properly this time, so there's no cheesing it. Excluding Celebi and Deoxys, where they are transfer only in these games, this game lets you hunt 488 Pokemon out of the first 493. Shaman and Darkrai were unfortunately still time-limited events, but if you claim them you can still hunt them, and you can even shiny hunt Arceus if you have a completed save of Legends Arceus. Similar to the Regis in Sword and Shield, all the legendaries and mythicals are forced full odds, as the shiny charm only works for eggs in these games. So I guess Phione is exempt from this, but the rest are forced full odds. There is one downside I must mention for BDSP. Due to a mishap in the code, Spinda is unable to leave the BDSP games, so if you get a shiny one, it is very much stuck in these games, right when you think they were doing pretty good to avoid that. Legends Arceus is not too bad, the starters from the Professor are locked, the gift Alolan Vulpix is locked, and all legendaries and mythicals are locked. Crazy to release a game with all of them unlocked, to turn around and lock them up, but Legends is a really good game so it gets a pass in my book. Also, I don't think they ever fixed it, but if you transfer in a shiny Giratina, make it Origin form, and have it use Shadow Force, it'll just crash the game. Shows they didn't really think about the shiny legends in the game all too much, and it's mostly just kind of a funny oversight. Now that we had that nice reprieve, Time for the final boss of shiny locks, Scarlet and Violet. This game has a metric shit ton of locks. Starters, locked. All new legendaries, locked. Gimme Ghoul, locked for some reason. The catchable forms of the Titans, locked. Blood Moon Ursaluna, the Paradox forms of the legendary beasts, the Paradox forms of the Swords of Justice, all shiny locked. Even all 25 past legendaries they brought back, every single one is shiny locked. Most of them have been shiny huntable in the past, and it also would have finally allowed us to get shinies of Spectrier, Glastrier, and the Cubfu line. But no, they are all shiny locked. Blood Moon Ursaluna, Ogerpon, Terrapagos, and Pecharunt, they're all boss fights you have to beat before getting a guaranteed catch, so them not being shiny at catch mode has some kind of explanation. The rest of these, excluding the starters, actually have something in common with all the legendaries in Legends Arceus. These are all static encounters in games where the transition to battle is seamless. You don't enter some battle dimension, you throw out your Pokemon where you were, still in the same existence of the overworld. So I theorize that they simply, for whatever reason, can't figure out how to make static Pokemon shiny huntable in a world with seamless battles. There's definitely workarounds they can make, but there's seemingly just no answer they can find that they are happy with. That's why all the past legendaries in Sword and Shield are huntable, because they aren't seamless battles. Scarlet and Violet are also the games with Meloetta finally catchable, and just like Keldeo, it would have been the perfect time to finally release the shiny. It even has a workaround against the seamless issue, as there's steps you must take for it to spawn in the first place, so it could have just been huntable through doing the spawning process, even if it would have been annoying. Ending off with these games, there's also the gift Sinnoh Starter and the Hisuian Growlithe in the Teal Mask DLC, which are really just whatever at this point, easy enough to breed them. Hell, the Indigo Disc even lets you straight up catch the starters in the wild and they can just be shiny there, so it's really no big deal. This video is pretty negative, I will fully admit that. The shiny locking is something that's bothered me since before I even started shiny hunting. It feels like such a weird inclusion, even with my theories on as to why they could be implementing them. Some of them are definitely locked just so that the shiny forms can be used for events, like how the 3 legendaries from the Sword and Shield base game were all eventually given out through codes. The Galarian forms of the legendary birds were used as rewards for online competitions. There are 35 fully locked Pokemon, 35 species that can't be shiny no matter what. An additional 15 alt forms that are also impossible to get. That's 50 right there. And sure, out of a roster of 1025 Pokemon before alt forms, it's really a small collection, but there doesn't exist a reason for them to not be able to be shiny. Victini, a Pokemon you could personally catch in 2010/2011, has still never been legally obtainable as shiny a whopping 14 years later. We are left waiting for them to decide to release an event, or for them to inevitably be placed behind a time-limited paywall in Pokemon Go. Next February will be the Unova Tour if they continue the trend, and that should net us a shiny mythical behind a paid ticket, and they'll give us one of the 3 missing shiny mythicals from Unova, leaving 2 to still have to wait for a potential release one day in the future. This all isn't to say that shiny locking is a horrible concept overall. There are examples in the games where it's a genuinely good addition. Locking Pokemon that can't leave a specific game is a good decision in my opinion. It would be truly heartbreaking to have to leave one behind, doomed to be forgotten as the time goes on. Again, fuck your spin to issue BDSP. In Sword and Shield, you are not able to catch Pokemon over a certain level determined by how many gym badges you have. Pokemon over this level threshold are unable to be shiny, meaning you can't run into an uncatchable shiny Pokemon, which I know was a worry I had when the catching restrictions were first revealed. Even stuff as simple as the Sunflora in the Artisan Gym Challenge being locked is a nice implementation. These examples only prove how these locks can be used for good. They do not have to be the devil, they just unfortunately are most of the time. I think that's all I have to say on this matter. Shiny locks fucking suck. Well, at least most of the time. I hope they can work out the kinks and ease up on them in the upcoming games, but that is most likely just wishful thinking at this point. If you have made it this far, I really want to thank you for watching. I've been very busy the past month and a half recording for an upcoming project, so I've had to do a lot of easier, quicker videos in the past few weeks, but I finally finished all of that recording, so while I still have a lot of work left for that project, I can finally get back to some bigger, more worked out videos, and it's nice to be back at it. With all of that said, if you've enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate it if you were to leave a like or maybe even subscribed. Both those really do help out the channel a lot. I also would love to hear from you in the comments down below, even if it's just something like a memorable shiny moment, or maybe it's the Pokemon you want the shiny lock removed from the most. Oh, and if you want to further support the channel, consider becoming a member. Doing so grants perks such as having your name appear on the screen right about now in future videos. Alright, this has been Big Blast 99. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I hope you all really have yourselves a goddamn good one.